And welcome back. So we are here at the Disruptive Diner. It is March 18th. It is still March 18th, 2014. And we are talking Surprisingly Open. So we just had Scott Graneman really walk us through kind of open source 101 and what that looks like. And we've kind of alluded a little bit that this is not just about software, that this is not just about geeky kinds of things or getting free software or whatever, that this is actually being used in some really powerful ways to affect change in communities. And that tees us up perfectly, actually, for Jonathan Leek. And Jonathan is with a local company here in St. Louis called Lumate. But more importantly, he's very active in the open data and in kind of the hackathon space of people that are really building on each other's work. And he's going to talk about an initiative that started last year. Last year was the first year. Yes. for St. Louis's participation in the National Day of Civic Hacking. And he's going to talk about how that's evolved and gone much further than it was last year, and what you can expect of how this allows people to get involved at the community level. When you're ready, once again, Jonathan Leek, he's going to be speaking in the PK format, which means his slides advance every 20 seconds, so cut him some slack, and there'll be time for questions afterwards. When you're ready, Jonathan.
All right. So last year, the White House put forth an initiative called the National Day of Civic Hacking. The idea was to promote the use of science and technology to improve communities across the nation. St. Louis found out about it kind of late. So we only got about a month and a half lead time, but we quickly threw something together. We were one of 93 sites across the country in 83 different cities. For those of you in St. Louis, you'll remember last year we had roughly 1,000 tornadoes hit our airport last year, and that was this weekend. So this is a picture from our event last year. We only had about 30 people show up, but we had 3 groups. They produced something really cool. This is actually the winning group. They managed to make an automated phone tree for placing the homeless in shelters, because right now you make a phone call and you get put on hold for 20 to 45 minutes while somebody else calls shelter after shelter after shelter. It's a pain, it's inefficient, and it's bad for people. But probably the most important thing to come out of this was the Open Data St. Louis group. So Brett Lord Castillo, who's part of St. Louis County Emergency Services, kind of led up this effort. And we've been working to try to get St. Louis to open up the publicly produced data. A great example is Metro transit data. Where are the buses? They all have GPS trackers. You can't just go to a website and see where that is. So why is this important? As was mentioned earlier, education. Monsanto, well, we'll get to that in a second. But so education, it's important for research, it empowers citizens, and it helps with entrepreneurship. So education-wise, you have companies like Monsanto that deal with a lot of data, and they need data scientists who know how to work with that data. But without open data to teach people on, it's really hard to educate people on how to do it. And so they use stuff like open data to train these data scientists so that when they go work for a company, they know how to use the tools. It's also helpful for research. There's another local entrepreneur named Arnaldo who runs a company called Sim Machines, and by looking at Twitter data, he was actually able to accurately predict the outcome of the Costa Rican elections, and more importantly, to locate fraud, voter fraud that was going on. And that's the kind of thing that's made available if data's there. Ellie Lammer is, in terms of empowering students, Ellie Lammer, when she was 12 years old, went around and timed parking meters in Berkeley because they were cheating people. And that was her science project, and there's actually a law named after her now. If that data was public, she wouldn't have to do that. I mean, she spent months going around with a stopwatch timing these things, and that shouldn't be necessary. And then finally, entrepreneurship. Going back to the transit example, if you go into the App Store right now, there are like 30 to 100, I don't know the actual number, apps available to make public transit useful, right? So it used to be if you get on the bus, you have to get the schedule, and it's annoying. Then it was Google Maps, and now there's like this whole interactive real-time solution. So the National Day of Civic Hacking. For this year, we wanted to increase the size. We wanted to reach more non-technical people. We wanted to, of course, make St. Louis a better place. And we wanted to develop more leadership in St. Louis. As part of this, like you said, I worked with a lot of different groups. One of the things I noticed, every group, it's the same problem. 60 people are part of it, 3 people do all the work. And so we're trying to better educate and empower people to take on more of those leadership roles. So to make that up, first we'll have the hackathon. That's an important part of this project, and we're still going to do it. For those of you who aren't familiar with the hackathon, basically we're going to get as many nerds together as we can. We're going to throw them in a room. We're going to give them access to a bunch of data sets and APIs, and we're going to tell them to make something awesome for St. Louis. And that's it. It's a simple model. We provide them food. They work for 48 hours. But there's that. We also want to do physical events. So right now we're partnered with Urban Harvest STL to do community gardens around St. Louis. We also want to reach out to Habitat for Humanity to build a house. There's a group called Zombie Squad that does disaster preparation. That's just way too fun not to work with. But in terms of reaching out to non-technical people, physical stuff is an important part of this. We also want to do training sessions. Probably 50 to 60 throughout the St. Louis and County, covering topics like entrepreneurship, cryptocurrency, programming, event planning, things that will help people do stuff after this weekend. Because as much as we can cram into this weekend, there's going to be stuff afterwards, right? We want to see an ongoing impact. Okay, so we're also going to be announcing our Code for America Brigade for St. Louis. We're going through that process now. We're also raising funds to bring some fellows here. For those of you that aren't familiar, Code for America works with local governments to work on open data projects. We're also going to be announcing a big data lab at the T-Rex. So this isn't our project, this is somebody else, but they want to announce it with us. But a big lab with researchers and tools and equipment and the resources necessary so that if you're an entrepreneur, you can go and you can tackle these problems even if you don't really know what you're doing. Obviously, this is a big project, right? I just described like 1,000 things happening that weekend. So in order to do that, we're having to partner with a lot of organizations. You know, a community effort like this can only be done if it's a community effort. So this is a small sampling. We're contacting over 100 organizations about different stuff. So if you're interested in getting involved, you can get in touch with me. My email's on the last slide. I'd be happy to talk to you, or come talk to me afterwards, and I'll get you some contact information. We'll set up some time to talk because we want to get as much of St. Louis involved as we can. So, and with that, I guess, are there any questions?
Great, thank you very much. This is the moment where I kind of have a long-winded question that I ask that allows you to catch your breath.
Woo.
So, but a great talk. So I think one of the first things is we're talking a lot about St. Louis here, but we actually have people watching from a lot of other places around the country. And this is not just a St. Louis thing. In fact, some people would say that St. Louis might even be a little bit late to the party.
Right.
Well, but we're doing our things at our own pace and everything. So can you talk a little bit about what's kind of the range of communities' participation?
Yeah, absolutely.
In something like this, of those 83 communities.
Right. So for the National Day of Civic Hacking, they ask for basically 4 different types of events. The hackathons are the big one, and most communities will do that. Those will range anywhere from like hundreds of people in cities like New York and San Francisco to little communities where there'll be 4 people in some guy's basement. It just kind of depends. They're also looking for the Code for America Brigade meetings. So cities that already have brigades will typically do some sort of event. Transparency camp stuff. There's a variety of different ways.
Transparency camp?
I don't know. I know they complain a lot because we scheduled this on top of them. Okay. The National Day of Civic Hacking
so is that like a
scheduled at the same time kind
of group?
I think it's an open data. I think you're right. I think it's a sunshine group. Again, not super familiar with it because we're not doing one.
There's actually some interesting things. There's a fairly large movement of people that are doing open data in the humanities. And there's actually a lot of machine learning people are using that. There's a great guy here at Washington University that did a study of all of the people that Shakespeare is likely to have collaborated with, and looked at what they've written and looked at some of the Shakespeare text, and has actually built these maps of who he likely collaborated with on which play, which playwrights and theater owners and stuff like that.
I mean, one of the things we're seeing kind of across discipline is this big data movement is now starting to apply to everything. We're at this kind of unique point in human history where we actually have access to all of this stuff, and we have the tools to process it. So if you look at literature papers, for example, over the last 10 years, they've gone from these kind of the kind of soft, critical analysis that a lot of people are kind of think of when they think of literature review, to these really detailed technical papers using stuff like word counts and like, how are things spelled? How are certain words and phrases used over time? Because you can go to, Google Books, you can look at this huge assortment of literature over the years, and you can just apply an algorithm and count how many times was this term used, and how did that change over time?
Like Chaucer and Canterbury Tales, that there's the realization that he was probably an aggregator, that he probably didn't write most of these. It's done in too many different voices. When you think about it, this is kind of a weekend where a lot of people are going to get together and build community, and it's kind of an excuse to work on projects together. I'm going to call on somebody that's here in the audience. Eric Hamblett is here from Bazaar Boy, but he's also starting a co-working space called Tech Artista, and we're actually in a co-working space, a different one, it's not yours. But can you talk a little bit about what this openness does for bringing community together and letting people work on projects? Would you mind sharing just a little bit?
So what we found working on Bazaar Boy, which is a event registration ticketing platform, is the most important part of events is actually the content that is created out of these events. So taking the time to actually aggregate this content and share it with people after an event. For example, this event is live streaming on Bazaar Boy, and we're going to package it to share afterwards. Making sure that lives on, because a lot of times these events happen, tornadoes, for example, pop up out of nowhere, but what's empowering and special about them is the ability to package it and share it afterwards. So I'm really looking forward to what comes out of this weekend. I haven't attended in the past. So.
I was wondering if you could tell us maybe one or two or maybe three really cool things you've seen other cities build as a result of these kinds of activities that maybe are an inspiration here.
Well, one of the things that really inspired us, a lot of cities are doing these community gardens and these physical projects. And that's something we really wanted to include. It didn't really occur to us last year, and honestly, because we threw it together in like a month, we didn't have a lot of time. We were just like, hackathon, because we know, I've planned 15 hackathons. I can do that in a month. Let's do that. But we saw a lot of community gardens, public sculptures, playgrounds, these very physical projects that when you get down to it, they tend not to be very expensive. They tend to add a lot to the community, but they just need man hours, right? Like if you want to start a community garden, that's a project, right? You have to till the ground, you have to plant the seeds, you got to put up fences. There's all this stuff, but at the end of the day, $100 maybe, as long as you get the land, $100 worth of seeds and you're good to go. So that's one of the things that really inspired us this year, and we really wanted to kind of branch out to that. I do a lot with the tech and entrepreneurship community in St. Louis, and I keep seeing that, we do all these hackathons. We do like 10, 15 of them a year now. But I see the same people at all of them, right? And I want to start seeing other people coming to these events. I want to start seeing the St. Louis as a whole, to start understanding how stuff like these hackathons or these different projects can improve the city and how they can get involved, even if they're not a tech person. I mean, I can't program. I'm part of a tech startup. I can't program. Like it's embarrassing.
Step this event and you have a problem.
Right, but I can still get involved. I can still get involved in this community, and I can still do stuff to improve the city that I grew up in and that I love.
So if you look at the discussion guide, there's some other great examples of some open projects out there. There's some open data portals. I know when Dave comes up next, he's going to talk about kind of a way that we're trying to formalize this to take it from these informal things. But there's really interesting things. In the city of New Orleans, they did a project where if you are a criminal defense lawyer, you spend a lot of time waiting for your cases to come up on the docket. And they did an open project to just actually aggregate all of the dockets of all of the judges, so that lawyers actually don't spend all of their time waiting in court. And they're now seeing they're handling cases far quicker with less money, less cost to public defenders, less cost to lawyers, and the lawyers like it because they don't waste their time at the courthouse. So there are projects that are actually very self-serving kinds of projects that people do. There's an open foraging kind of thing. So there's a big urban foraging movement that people collecting acorns and all of the stuff comes from trees to use it for food stuff, and publishing maps of where you can collect that stuff in town. So
I know, in St. Louis, the crime data, mapping crime data is a huge one that a lot of people want to tackle in St. Louis. As most of you are probably aware, we're always in like the top 5, like most violent cities in the country, and it's due to a sampling error. Like it's just the way that data is collected and interpreted is what causes that. Specifically, it's the city-county split. And so there's been a lot of efforts to map crime data so people can actually see like what kinds of crimes are happening there, where, how much, all of that stuff. But it's a notoriously tricky problem because any given crime is actually like 6 crimes, right? Like if you rob a liquor store, it's not just theft, it's assault, battery, breaking and entering, concealing your identity. Like it's a laundry list. And the data it's difficult to wrap around and to package in a way that's useful for a human being. So.
All right, so we're going to take a break. We're going to get ready with Dave, who's going to come back and talk to us about how we formalize this and we look at this as really looking at political and civic change. So thanks, we'll be right back.